All right, welcome. In this explainer, we're going to unpack how social learning theory helps us understand and maybe even tackle some major health issues. Now, for all you IB psychology students listening, you know this is a core topic, so we're going to dive deep and give you the analysis you need for those exams.
So let's start with a really critical question, one that's going to be our guide through this whole discussion. And seriously, this isn't just for show. This is a fantastic evaluation point that can really boost your analysis in an essay. So keep this in the back of your mind as we go through all the evidence.
Okay, Section 1, Foundations. Before we can even think about applying social learning theory or SLT to health problems, we first need to get a solid grasp on that fundamental link between our behavior and our health. It's a connection that, honestly, is easy to overlook, but it's absolutely central to modern health psychology.
You know, a lot of us think of health as something that just happens to us. You get a cold because, well, a virus got into your system, right? But that's only half the story. Your health behavior, I'm talking about things like your stress levels, how much you sleep, your diet, even how often you wash your hands, all of that directly influences your immune system's ability to fight off that virus. This whole idea shifts our perspective from being just passive victims of illness to being active participants in our own well-being. And this is exactly where the psychologist Albert Bandura comes in. His social learning theory, which he later expanded into the broader social cognitive theory, you'll see it called SCT, is honestly one of the most important and widely used theories in all of health psychology. It gives us a framework not just for explaining how health problems pop up, but also for designing ways to actually change them. So how does social learning actually work when we're talking about health? Let's break down the key mechanisms, the nuts and bolts that really drive how we learn and change our health behaviors. Okay, the most intuitive part of the theory is right here, observational learning. It's simple, right? We learn by watching other people. Think about all the diet trends you see on social media. If you see a bunch of influencers and all your friends promoting a certain way of eating, you might just be influenced to try it yourself. This is a perfect example of how health behaviors, both the good and the bad, can spread through our social networks like wildfire. But here's the thing. Just seeing someone else do something isn't enough to make you do it too. The real key, the central concept for actually changing your behavior, is what Bandura called self-efficacy. This is your belief in your own ability to succeed. It's that internal I can do this switch that takes you from just wanting to change to actually putting in the work. It's the foundation of what we call personal agency. So, where does this powerful belief come from? Well, Bandura identified three main sources. First up, performance accomplishments. This is just your own track record. If you manage to stick to a workout plan for a week, your belief that you can do it for a month skyrockets. Makes sense, right? Second, vicarious experience. This is seeing someone like you succeed. That's why relatable role models are so incredibly powerful. And third, verbal persuasion. That's a doctor, a coach, or even just a friend telling you, hey, I believe in you, you can do this. And this quote from Bandura himself just nails it. It really highlights how incredibly crucial he thought self-efficacy was. He's not saying it's just one factor among many. He's saying it is the most central mechanism of personal agency. It's the engine that drives all change. Okay, so we've got the theory down. Now let's look at the evidence. For really clear ethical reasons, we obviously can't design experiments to cause health problems in people. So instead, we look at the next best thing. We study how effective real-world intervention programs are, especially those that were designed using these exact principles of social learning. Our first case study is a program called Challenge, from a 2010 study by Black and their colleagues. This is a fantastic, really concrete example of social cognitive theory in action, applied to a major public health issue, obesity among urban Black teens. Now, what's really important here is the study's design. It was a randomized, controlled trial. That's the gold standard for trying to figure out cause and effect. They randomly put participants into either the program or a control group. The program group got sessions with relatable mentors, which is a direct application of that idea of vicarious experience. The mentors were role models, and by setting small, achievable goals, like drinking water instead of soda, the program worked to build self-efficacy through performance accomplishments. And here's where it gets really interesting. Look at the results on this graph. See the blue line? That's the group that was in the program. Over 2 years, the percentage of them who were overweight or obese actually went down by 5%. Now look at the red line, the control group. Their rate went up by 11%. That is a really significant difference. And while some effects, like how much they exercised, didn't last, the reduction in eating snacks did last, even at the 24-month follow-up.
Okay, so that was one study. But now let's zoom out and look at even broader evidence, this time using a very modern tool, social media. We're going to look at a meta-analysis from 2023. And a meta-analysis is basically a study of studies. It mathematically combines the results from lots of different experiments, in this case 28 of them, to find the overall effect. This gives us a much more powerful and reliable conclusion than any single study could.
Now, this might look a little complicated, but trust me, it's not. It's called a forest plot, and it tells a really powerful story. Each one of those little black squares is an individual study. The crucial part is that red diamond at the bottom. That represents the average effect of all the studies combined. And since that diamond doesn't touch the vertical zero line, it tells us the overall effect is statistically significant. In other words, on average, these social media programs worked. They led to a reduction in weight.
So how big was that effect? Well, across all 28 studies, the average weight difference between the people in the programs and the people in the control groups was a loss of 1.45 kilograms. And again, this result was statistically significant, which means it's very unlikely to be just a random fluke.
But, and this is a huge but, this brings us to a vital theory of knowledge link, the difference between statistical significance and practical significance. A result can be real, but is it meaningful? Is an average weight loss of 1.45 kilograms, that's about 3 pounds, is that actually useful in the real world for tackling something as big as the obesity epidemic? That's a key evaluation question you should be asking of any study you read.
Right, so this means we can't just take these findings at face value. As critical thinkers, as IB students, our job is to evaluate the evidence. And that starts with understanding a major logical trap.
And this is a big one. It takes us right back to that question we started with. It's called the treatment etiology fallacy. It's the mistake of assuming that just because a treatment works, the theory it's based on must be the right explanation for what caused the problem in the first place. For example, hey, aspirin cures headaches, right? But that doesn't mean headaches are caused by a lack of aspirin in your body. In the same way, even if an SLT-based intervention helps reduce obesity, that doesn't definitively prove that social learning is the sole cause of obesity.
Okay, so now let's take our critique to the next level, using those IB psychology key concepts. This is how you really achieve that top-tier analysis in your essays, by applying these conceptual lenses to the research you're discussing.
This table sums up some excellent evaluation points using those concepts. Let's just walk through them. First, perspective. SELT is clearly using a sociocultural perspective. It's all about learning in a social world. Then, bias. We have to worry about publication bias. That's the tendency for studies with successful results to get published while the failures get buried. And there's sampling bias. Most of this research is on Western populations, so does it even apply globally? Measurement is a huge one. How do you even define success? A change in BMI? What you say you eat? And how long does that change have to last account? With causality, as we just saw, it's super hard to prove. Health is complicated, and these studies show a link, a correlation, not a definitive cause. Change is another big question. These programs might work in the short term, but do they create lasting change? And finally, responsibility, which leads to some really complex questions.
So, to recap the absolute must-knows for your evaluation toolkit, first, always question potential bias in the research you read. Second, always dig into how they're measuring the key outcomes, or success. And third, always be a little skeptical of simple claims about what causes what, especially when you're dealing with something as messy and complex as health.
And this really highlights why getting this right is so important. This isn't just an academic game. If we oversimplify things and say, oh, people just learn to be obese from their friends, it can lead to some really harmful policies. Things like shaming people to try and fight obesity, or a blanket ban on cell phones in school. These are clumsy, ineffective strategies that can end up doing way more harm than good, and they come from a misunderstanding of a complex theory.
So we'll end on this final thought. Social learning theory forces us to ask this deep and honestly very difficult question. If our behavior is so heavily influenced by the social world around us, who is ultimately responsible for our health? Is it the individual? Is it the role models they see? Or is it the society that creates the whole environment where these behaviors are learned in the first place? There is no easy answer here, but it's a question worth thinking long and hard about. Thanks for tuning in.